All right, now I will call the meeting of the wastewater committee to order at 6:31. We have Al Hamilton, Alan Belniak, Brian Shea, and Sam Stivers, and myself, Al Hamilton, present, as well as Anna Wojcik. Anna, have I pronounced your last name correctly?
Yes, that was perfect.
Okay, all right.
And Chris is here too, Chris Pepper.
Oh, I'm sorry, and Chris is here as well. Okay.
I'll volunteer, Al, to take the minutes again tonight.
Thank you. All right. We're gonna delay the approval of the past minutes because we had a typo in the minutes. So we'll get caught up at the next meeting. The next item is really to sort of press forward with the two one-stop applications. And I understand that in my absence, the team decided to make a substantial change to the application for the downtown area to turn it essentially into a planning grant. At the select board meeting, Claire bailed me out and gave an update on that. I did meet with the Board of Selectmen and have secured their support for both grants and for the concept of providing a 25% match as we go forward. The other thing I did was I reached out to Mark Purple, who we had nominated as the CEO in the application. It turns out the chair of the select board is the proper person to identify, and that would be Andrew Dennington. And then finally, I reached out to our reps, and Kate Donahue has gotten back to me and has offered to write a letter of support. And I have not yet heard from Jamie Eldridge. I'm going to be having coffee with Andrew Dennington, who is a friend of his, and so I'm going to lean on him to see if he can't move things along. I think those were the principal. Oh, and the other action item that I had was to review those 4 programs to see if we participated in them, and we do not. So Anna, can you give us sort of an update on where we stand?
Hey, Al.
Yes.
Can I give a quick update also?
Absolutely.
Following up previous meetings, Bob Moss and I talked about the impact part of the applications. And Bob has gone through and taken a look at the various properties and development opportunities there and provided input to Anna in terms of the application form for numbers there in terms of how much can be developed, how many additional housing units and square feet of commercial space, et cetera, which is at this point clearly simply an estimate, but at least it gives us numbers for both the Route 9 and the downtown. And I've provided some language on more broadly about the impact statement. We've got to talk about why we're going to make impact here. So there's a first pass at that. And I'm assuming that Anna can pull all that together and circulate the most recent version of all that stuff to the group to take a look at some point here. But she's gotten some additional input there as well as a starting point.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Yeah, that's been super helpful, and I've incorporated that into the application. I'll quickly share my screen. It says the host disabled participant screen sharing.
Yeah, that's the default. Give me 1 second. Okay, you should be good to go.
Al, you say, are we not going to have Claire or Bob here this evening?
I may have missed Claire's. I know Bob has a conflict.
Okay.
I wasn't aware that Claire did, but she may.
Okay.
So as a basic agenda for today, I was thinking that we would go through the application and any questions that you have to talk about progress, and then identify some areas needing assistance. And Sam, I saw your email from earlier. We'll definitely talk about the site information as part of this agenda. And then establishing a schedule for when we are planning on having everything ready and submitting the final applications. So as for our progress, we are in really good shape with the front end information, with the project abstract, the scope, the narrative, anticipated outcomes. And I plan on sharing all that information with all of you shortly on the SharePoint site once we have all that reviewed. And I'll send an email out to everyone on the committee once that's uploaded into the SharePoint site. As for project scopes, as Al just talked about, we did change or shift gears last meeting, and we're working on a planning application for the downtown district. So as for a scope for that, we're working on what could be done with the agreed upon amount of $50,000 for a master plan and for progressing that project. And for the Route 9 project, we've been working on a scope for all those hydrogeo investigations for the possible disposal sites and some preliminary permitting that can be done with the grant requested. Does anyone have any questions about that?
No, I think we're making good progress. Yeah, if you could share the actual text, I think we need to sort of walk through line by line and proceed. I will note that I don't know whether others saw it. Bob has done yeoman's service here. He's secured letters of support from Ferris and DePetri, who are major developers along Route 9. So I think we were able to show community support from the business community.
Great. I haven't seen those. So he sent those to you, Al?
I think he said he would have them shortly.
Okay, good.
In his email.
And it's my understanding that Anna is going to incorporate the latest input and send that around, put it on the SharePoint site soon, but not necessarily for discussion this evening. Is that accurate?
Yes, I think the plan is to upload them to the SharePoint site, and then you can look in that individually and put any comments you have on them. Okay. And that way it's not being distributed around, and there's a bunch of different versions of the application.
I had a comment about the site information description. Mm-hmm. Is this the right time to talk about that?
Sure.
Yes, we can get right into that.
The application form asks about basically site control, and I was unsure about how to handle that because at least as I see it, there are several possible sites here, none of which we really own other than sort of the golf course for discharge field. So I'm not quite sure what they're looking for there. I mean, is it sufficient to say that we don't really directly immediately control any of the prospective sites, but we have at least there's the possibility that we could certainly work a deal to get control of that site if we had the money and the right price and so forth, and agreement of the current property owners. But it's still very iffy in my mind at this point, so I'm not sure what they're looking for. Would that be enough to disqualify us if it didn't look like we had very near-term prospects of having site control?
No, because throughout the process, for both the planning and the design projects, part of the project is to identify the sites. So there wouldn't be disqualification if a site wasn't either owned now or possibly owned in the future. And this is good to discuss, to maybe talk about what we think the best site would be for the Route 9 project to discuss here. There's this part of the application where we talk about a project site. So there's just the general site information would be the address, and project site description is what is the site and why is it the general site that we're using for this project.
Too bad Bob's not here, because he clearly believes that the Route 9 site is the Bartolini property there, with cooperation from the Dell property, neither of which we directly control, but certainly there's a reasonable possibility we could arrange that. And I think for many reasons, that's a pretty attractive site. So it seems to me that it's not a bad strategy to describe that as the primary site, unless others have a different view.
I think we should maybe, I think what we ought to say is, I mean, the purpose of this grant is to help us identify a site which we would then intend to purchase. But you know, subject to you know, the detailed geotechnical review, and that site would involve both a site for a plant and the site for a disposal area. And, you know, I mean, I think that as long as we say that, you know, again, you guys tell me if I'm crazy, that, you know, our goal here is to identify a site which we would then intend to purchase, and to identify and evaluate a site, and that there really is a substantial technical evaluation that needs to be done to make sure that a site we would purchase is appropriate for the purposes intended, which are quite specialized.
That's right, Al. If I may, a substantial portion of the scope of work that's going to be articulated as part of this application will be focused on those very tasks. It's actually a hydrogeologic assessment that will be done, and again, subsurface investigation predominantly, and you know, the nature of that scope will be somewhat fluid as we work through it, and it's all a question of how many sites and how far down the road can we get through the hydrogeological assessment work with the available grant money. And
Chris,
yeah,
would it not be helpful to point out that there are several, based on the work that has been done to date, there are several possible sites that could qualify. And it would be better, frankly, if we didn't have to identify those sites publicly at this point for a variety of reasons. But would it be sufficient to simply say that there are several based on prior work, and we'll move forward to evaluate them and any others that
I think it's suitable to say that we did a desktop analysis of sites across the entire corridor, and that there is promise. There are indications that there are sites that can accommodate this size groundwater discharge, and thus we feel it's an appropriate next step to actually put holes in the ground to do on-site investigation work.
Yeah, we would have to engage with the current owners, and then, you know, come to at least some form of an understanding, so that we could perform the hydrological and geotechnical service. Did I say that right this time?
Hydrogeological. Yeah.
Hydrogeologic. Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
we should all
Yeah.
practice that.
Yeah.
Right. And relative to the work itself, our hydrogeo folks, you can abbreviate it, that might be easier. Our hydrogeo folks that are helping us develop this scope have talked about a number of different kind of strategies as to what that looks like. And again, some of that may be geological borings. Some of it, you know, small diameter boreholes. Some of it may be test pits, and some of it may simply be geophysics, which is a variety of other techniques that are less intrusive. And so how we deploy those techniques depends on the reception we get from a particular property owner, how willing they are to kind of work with us. You know, it runs the gamut, as you would imagine. But without question, any of those activities requires advance approval and an agreement with the property owner as to what's being requested, and the terms of that field work, and not only how you arrive, but how you leave, and how you leave their site at the conclusion of the work.
But we won't get dinged if we don't have a specific set of sites in this application, is the key.
Not to our experience. I mean, in the sense that this is what this looks like, right? It has to be an additional level of site screening, which is what this essentially is. It's just actually getting actual conditions, as opposed to sort of theoretical conditions based on statewide mapping, based on surficial geology maps prepared by USGS and other sources.
Good. And I'll note, I see Claire has joined us. I'll indicate that in the minutes here.
Good evening.
Okay. All right. And just to give you a quick update, Claire, we've sort of gone through the status, and we've secured some letters of support from we're in the process of securing letters of support from our legislatures and at least a couple of the developers along Route 9. And we've been talking about sort of how we wordsmith the site control questions.
Right. The other thing is I had posted kind of an update. It's a section by section update in terms of who needs to do what. It's posted on the SharePoint drive, so I just wanted to draw everybody's attention to that.
Okay. So on the Route 9 application, what are we missing at this point? Claire, I
Yes.
think you probably thought this through, Claire and Anna.
Yeah, so in relation to the site, while we're still on it, we do have to identify a site address and a general site for the project to just in this system to move forward with the application. It's a required question. So we would have to submit an address along Route 9 that we believe would be the best site address. And then in the written portion of the application, we can say we are still evaluating sites and explain that.
We could, just as an idea, we could put the golf course, which is something we own, and certainly is something we are still thinking about, with the understanding that, you know, this is one of the places we're thinking about. What do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea.
We,
That'll
we
be,
w- we couldn't put the plant on the golf course, though.
Yeah, I was wondering if we should name the site behind the transfer station as the address.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yep.
I like that.
And that has an address on Middle Road, I think.
Yeah.
I get the
But-
feeling though that this is more like, we all here know that we don't know what the final site is. So
Right.
perhaps somewhere in the write-up, or even if it's just one sentence, we can describe that, and we're putting something down for the sake of putting something down, but
Yeah.
we have a degree of confidence.
I think it makes sense to whatever address we put, though, that it is a town-owned property.
Yeah.
And not
Yep.
a privately owned lot.
Yeah, no, I think
Agree.
that site has a name and I've forgotten it right off the top of my head, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anna, I'll get you the that address.
Great, yes, and it also requires just like a 500 character write-up about the site. If you could provide any information you have about the site, and I could incorporate that into the application.
Oh, yeah, that would be the place to explain that
Mhm.
this is one of the potential sites, you know, and what the purpose of the grant is. I can take that action item.
Great.
All right, what else are we missing on the Route 9 application?
For the Route 9 application, we just went over site information. So there's also a section specifically about private development. And if there is a single private development that is really benefiting from this project, you mentioned that there are a few letters of support coming for the Route 9 project. Are either of those developments planning to be in the near future and would really benefit from this sewer project, or are they still in the preliminary phase?
Well, there is one 40B development that is in the process of being permitted.
352 there is the natural one,
Yeah, 352 would be another one. Yeah,
and 250.
yeah.
There are 240B developments that are. I mean, the big one is the Atlantic Management, which owns part of the Dell site now, and could own more. We don't know the details. The details of that are still being worked out of what they want to do, but they clearly want to do something there. So
It's probably a little short on time to actually meet with Atlantic. What do you think, Sam?
I don't think that they're going to tell us anything at this point.
Well, I think it was more like asking if they would be interested in providing a letter of support. But yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. They really haven't closed it.
Yeah, that's a little squishy at this point.
Yeah, okay, all right.
But I think having that on the list is that's a piece of property that has been recently acquired and is in
And
the development pipeline here, in addition to the 240Bs, I think are useful to
okay.
list.
Is that something that we sort of need 500 words on?
That can be something that we can explain in the anticipated outcome section. I believe we have 1,000 characters to work with for that.
Okay. Does somebody want to take the action item to draft that?
I can do that.
All right. Yeah, I think,
And then there's also some space here. So if we want to identify a specific private development, it would be 5.19 to 5.22. We would fill out those sections, and then we would have 1,000 characters to work with here to talk about that specific development. And if there isn't a development that we want to identify here, we have this 5.5A to describe how the project will just drive future development, and 1,000 characters here. So we definitely have a lot of space to talk about.
I think it's really future development, given that, you know, we are a very optimistic 5 years away from our first
Mhm.
flush. So what we're really talking about are developments which aren't necessarily even on the drawing board yet. I mean, in fact, that's the whole goal here, is to try and,
Mhm.
you know, I think what we certainly could do is talk about how, you know, we've had substantial feedback that the lack of wastewater treatment facilities has impeded a number of types of businesses from locating in our town, and you know that has a carry-on effect that is more than just within the borders of Southborough. I could take a swing at that one if you want.
Okay, yeah, that would be great.
Okay, would you do me a favor and just send me the text of the question so I make sure I address it appropriately?
Yes.
Okay, what else do we need to get?
So that is all for the Route 9 application.
All right,
And because the downtown district is just a planning grant, they don't request any site-specific information or private development specific information. So we are also all set with the downtown district.
all right.
And then,
The-
obviously, I will share those on the SharePoint site for you all to see.
I mean, there is some context for downtown, and I mean, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but there is a parcel, a National Grid parcel that is right behind downtown there that we've talked about
Mhm.
acquiring, that could actually put a small plant, not it's like 1.67 acres, so it doesn't have a big discharge area, but that is potentially available because it's surplus,
Yes.
National Grid surplus property. I don't know if that helps our case at all, but we're not close to having a deal on that, but they are interested in selling it.
Yeah, I saw that in the reports that have been developed for that project as well. And that's a good thing to include in like the project narrative section, that a
Okay.
site has been preliminary identified and we're going to look into it more.
Okay, I think that's a fair statement.
Great. The next question I had was for the match amount, and just if you have the information at town meeting, when the match amount will be requested, do you
Planning
know
grant.
what fund that would be pulled from?
Pardon?
When and how much? There's likely to be a fall town meeting in October to early November.
Yeah.
And it could be a warrant article there to get a match. Failing that timing, the next chance is annual town meeting next April.
Yeah. So my understanding is that the grants are awarded, you know, sometime in the early fall, and that we then have until a year to essentially come up with our share and sign an agreement. Is that are we correct in that?
Yes, the contract has to be signed by the end of the fiscal year, so that would be June of the following year, so
Okay.
June 2026.
Yeah, so the select board has been briefed on that time frame and has agreed that they would pursue funding either through a fall town meeting or at the annual if we receive the grants.
Great. And you've already mentioned some good progress with the letters of support from legislators and stakeholders. Al, do you know if any progress has been made on a letter of support from the select board chair?
Yes, yeah, the select board has in fact voted to support both these applications.
Okay.
So I will get a letter of support from the chair stating that and also stating their support for the funding.
Right. If we help Walt too, I can send just kind of a basic what we usually do for a letter of support from the organization CEO, and they could build off that.
Yeah, send it to me and I'll take care of it.
Great. Thank you. So that's all I have for the application. Do you
Okay.
have any questions?
I've got one. Just remind me, what date is this due on? I just want to do some day math here.
Yeah, so the last official day to submit is June 4th.
Okay. It's like, is
So-
this? Okay. Obviously we're going to meet sometime between now and then. I'm just wondering, maybe after you circulate what you have tonight in the discussion today, we'll figure out sort of how much more work is then left. I'm just trying to make sure we have enough time to meet at least once more, and it sounds like we will, because that's
Yeah.
well,
Meetings.
for 13 days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we're likely to meet at least twice more before we send it. But yeah, what we can do is yeah, we'll send, I'll send, I think we send our drafts of the text to Anna. She puts it on the shared drive. And actually, as we send them in, I think we can appropriately comment, send copies to each of the committee members with the understanding that we can't discuss it. That way we can at least review it, and I can set up another meeting. In fact, let's talk about that because time is of the essence.
yeah, can we just go back for 1 second
Sure.
before we talk about meeting? You said send individual copies to each one of us.
What I'm thinking about, so, Sam and I have the action items to develop some text.
Mhm.
And we can send it to Anna and copy members of the board so they can at least see. Or do you want to just do it all through the site?
Should be through SharePoint. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
that's
I
safer.
was just thinking, that way it's one doc. We all see it.
Yeah.
If anyone's even live editing, we see it, because
Okay.
trying to manage and juggle different
I-
copies isn't ever.
Yep, I'm good.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Then let's talk about.
Can we, I just have a question about that on the process, because I have I have two documents. I just want to make sure everybody understands. One is I took and sent, it's one document that I posted up on the SharePoint drive, and it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it has two tabs in it, and one is the section responsibilities, so to speak, or assignments for each of the sections in the application, like 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, whatever. And I can bring that up if you guys want to take a look at it.
Yeah,
And
why
then
don't
the
we?
second part of it is the text that I have filled in from my experience in terms of the downtown grant and the Route 9 grant, and filling it in right in the application, which I can do. It's just a copy and paste from the document that I have. I've been doing it in Word, and the reason is because that allows you to keep the word count so that you know pretty much where you're going with it.
Mhm.
Um,
Characters though, which is.
Yeah, but that being the case, I just want to make sure everybody understands, and I'm not exactly sure how it works in SharePoint in terms of, let's just say as an example, that I put in, I did tonight right after this meeting, everything that I have put in, then what's the process for people making changes to that or additions? how does that actually work?
You can just set it to track changes, and then whenever someone deletes something, it shows as a cross out, and it shows you the name of the person who
Okay,
did
so
it.
it actually
Same-
works the same way you do it in a Word document?
Exactly. Yep. And
Okay.
you can all be in the same thing at the same time, even.
Okay, all right.
All right, yeah, no, that's the right way to do it, okay.
But I think that, again, Anna seems to me is the control point for that in
Mhm.
terms of everybody works through Anna and she manages the SharePoint site versus all of us sort of communicating directly with one another. I think that's important for open meeting law standpoint. And Claire, in
Well,
terms of
I think that was my
responsibilities,
question that I had. Where does this in terms of, I mean, I'm not raising the issue, but you just want to make sure that nobody else does. Essentially, we have a document that we're collaborating on.
How about this? I'll volunteer to email the clerk tomorrow. I'll get an answer on this. This way we don't have to keep talking about it for 20 more minutes. I agree. I don't want to violate open meeting law. I want to see if co-editing a document is against that. If it is, then we all send edits serially to Anna. Sorry, Anna. And you can make edits. But if we are allowed to collaboratively edit one doc, I'll let us all know that. I'll let us all know either way.
good.
Excellent.
And Claire, in terms of responsibilities, I mean, we've basically done that in terms of Anna has gone through and filled this stuff out. We've got a few open assignments here, but I think all that is now clear in terms of who's doing what in terms of the application parts. At least that's my understanding.
At a high level, yes.
And if there's
Can-
anything missing, Anna can let people
Yeah.
know and ask for more input.
Can I just weigh in? I just want to make sure maybe we break that into component parts as I think about process here. Maybe you get the determination and if we need to come up with an alternate method of collaborating, can I ask that maybe we think about a way to compile the town's comments in a way that Anna isn't getting 5 or 6 versions, then to decipher them all, that we think about what that might look like. I'm just thinking through how we make sure we're efficient and get this thing in.
Okay. I
Let's
have
just
an idea.
consider it one step at a time. That's all.
If we have to go that route, perhaps we can just basically set up a daisy chain. Person A makes their edits, they email that document to person B, they make their edits. We're not going to have the benefit of all seeing
Yeah.
it would just go one at a time. The last person is a person who emails it to Anna or posts it on the SharePoint site. And there's no cross collaboration, cross contamination, violation of OML. And that way it will be in one document. And then Annie, you would just need to consider that one set of group changes.
Okay.
Yeah,
That work?
great. Mhm.
Okay.
Super.
You're going to get input from the town clerk on the process, Alan.
Yeah, Alan's got that action item.
You're muted,
Yeah.
Alan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep,
All
I
right.
already have that on my to-do list.
You're good.
All right. I think we've got our plan for the application. Do we want to continue having site discussions? I know that Bob seems to be who seems to have his finger on this stuff pretty carefully, has sort of his leading candidate for a site, and then I should let the board know that at 8 o'clock, I'm supposed to have a conversation with conservation and SVT about using the golf course as a disposal site. And I know, Chris, I think you got Sam, you had mentioned that using the golf course as a disposal site may be more challenging than we thought, and maybe we ought to have a little discussion about that, so I'm at least well armed.
Yeah, my concern following our discussion last time, Chris, in terms of some of your comments, is that I was thinking that maybe we could use it as a disposal site and claim that it was part of the irrigation process. But last time you suggested that given that we would be disposing underground, then and water travels downward, that wouldn't qualify for irrigation. And the conservation restriction on the golf course pretty clearly says that you can construct and maintain an irrigation system there. It doesn't talk specifically about a wastewater discharge site there. I did have a chance to talk briefly with town council about this, and he was not so concerned about that, but he said you got to look at it carefully and have the discussion with him, and maybe there's some wiggle room there. He wasn't sure. He hadn't studied the conservation restriction carefully.
Mhm.
I talked with him, so he was not ready to rule that out, but he agreed that that irrigation was possibly a stretch there.
Mhm.
So
Okay,
to be determined.
sure. I mean, yeah, to be determined, certainly. Um, I don't know that I have experience, thinking about the siting or actually executing the siting of a discharge in an area that has such a restriction. But that being said, we're not modifying use. We're not modifying, in terms of how the site is able to be used by whomever is accessing it. And you're not changing, the development characteristics of it. So,
And the
I
appearance-
like to think that wouldn't be a deal breaker, actually.
the appearance of the site would not be changed before and after.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so, again, it's the kind of thing, I think that if they actually wanted to do it, I think they could. And the question is, do they believe that it is a worthwhile thing? And I think sort of the green, aspect of this in terms of reusing the water in a productive way might carry some weight here. But again, it's worth the conversation. And Al, I wouldn't necessarily go into great detail with them tonight on this, but just sort of
Oh, no.
context.
Oh, no. I mean, my feeling is the fig leaf that we have here, and you guys can decide how big it is,
Small fig leaf.
is that during some portion of the year, the wastewater would be available for, a traditional irrigation, and that in order to make that economically viable, we have to also be able to dispose of the excess on site. And, so that's kind of, I think that's a reasonable sized fig leaf. I think, my conversations with conservation today are going to be, this is incredibly preliminary. We have done no detailed engineering, but we wanted to give you a heads up that we are at least thinking about this, and we wanted to solicit your feedback. We think there are some green aspects of doing this. We have other sites we are looking at, but it's really a question of making sure that that we're thinking about this, and we would be happy to engage with you further and have productive discussions. But I think there's an opportunity to save the golf course operation some significant funds. Our intention is not in the long run to change the use or the character of the golf course. But so it's really informative. This is incredibly preliminary. We haven't, no plans have been developed yet. It's really informational.
But per Chris's comment at the last meeting, Al, it sounds like if we actually wanted to use water for irrigation during the summer months, for example, that would actually raise the bar in terms of level of treatment that we would need to do versus simply underground discharge. And so there's an additional cost for that, not clear how much. And so you got to look at the economics of that, but that's an option that I think we should certainly consider.
Chris, could you just talk a little bit more about that? So, I'm not intending to bring it up, but I just sort of
Sure. Yeah, there are water reuse standards that would come into play, and what that really means is it essentially requires a higher level of effluent quality coming out of the treatment plant, and that essentially means removal of color, removal of turbidity, to greater degree than you would normally be required for a groundwater discharge. Sometimes in these applications, disinfection is not required for it to be a groundwater discharge either. Conventionally, sometimes there's different conditions that DEP applies for that, but it would certainly be required in this case as well. So there's a few different things that then brings into question, what kind of technology are you going to use to achieve those standards and hit those required limits that are more stringent than a typical groundwater discharge.
So I know also that a question we're going to get asked that maybe you can help us with is, do these plants smell? And am I going to smell it? 'Cause I know it's going to get asked. How do
I
you,
mean,
how do you address that?
It depends
Well-
on how sensitive your nose is, Al.
yeah, and for how long, I suppose, right before it gets knocked out by the odor. Yeah, I mean, facilities can they generate odors, and it's a question of how you mitigate those, how you mitigate the siting, via siting, via technology, and by and large, these are not the odors are managed, especially in particular when things are operated properly, right? Things good. There's a process upset to the biology. It introduces temporary kind of issues that sometimes can cause problems to sort of receptors. But by and large, in particular, these size facilities, the odors are generally managed quite well. And it's usually a combination of factors, right? In terms of how you site it, how you, what your structures look like, what your reactor tanks look like, whether they are above ground, below ground, how do you contain the air and condition the air that is within that waste stream and near that open liquid waste stream, in a way that enables them to be operating, and nobody's the wiser. Oftentimes, folks have no idea they're walking adjacent to or over a treatment plant.
Okay.
Al, you might mention that you did reach out to the Westboro Sewer Board.
Yeah. Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes.
They
I
tossed
got
it.
one of these.
They tossed it back. Well, they
no.
tossed it back to the select board. They said, basically, we run the plant. We don't make policy decisions. It's
Yeah.
up to the select board to determine it. And we have talked to, I guess, former chair of the select board, so he knows we're interested, but no imminent discussion or strong indication of interest in working with us on it.
The select board sent us to the plant, and the plant, or the wastewater committee, and the wastewater committee sent us back to the select board. So, we're playing a little bit of ping pong.
In the loop.
But they did get back to us, and they were perfectly polite, and and they're probably right. This is a decision above their pay grade. Okay. Any other items that we should be discussing? I think then let's
I
talk
just-
about.
Claire?
I
Pardon?
just have one quick question. And I apologize. I was a few minutes late, chiming in here. Maybe you already discussed it. Essentially, we have 5 business days left till the end of this month in order to get this all pulled together. And I know you're gonna schedule, we have tomorrow and next week there's 4 days because of the holiday.
Yeah.
Okay. And I spoke with Vanessa about the IGX system. She hadn't talked to anybody. She has reserved Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of June to enter information into the system. We do not want to wait because of the problems that they have had in the past until the last day. Okay, and I told her, I said, by everything that we had been talking about, it was my understanding that we were going to have everything put together by a week from tomorrow, which is 5 business days. My question is, how does everybody feel comfortable with making that time frame?
I think so.
I think so.
Okay.
I think we
I
scheduled a
also
meeting.
emailed to everybody on this meeting what I put together in terms of it's a little bit more detailed than what was presented tonight. Maybe it's too much detail, but it's essentially takes each individual section and says what has to be done and who I think has to provide the information.
Okay.
I'm glad to
Did
bring it up. If you have
you
time,
send, did you
not-
send it?
take a look at it. And I did put it was posted today. But I don't know if everybody's been checking the SharePoint site.
I
Probably.
didn't look today.
So that's why I sent it out just as an attachment to an email.
When did you
Alright.
send that, Claire? I didn't see that.
Well, I posted it this afternoon. It was late. I think it was around 4
Oh.
o'clock.
I haven't looked at the SharePoint.
Okay. which is what I figured. And that's why I just sent it out now, just as a regular attachment.
Well, I think, Claire, from a schedule standpoint, if we aim to meet like next Tuesday, for example.
Okay, yep,
Tuesday or
Yeah.
Wednesday.
perfect.
And
Yeah,
then it sounds like Anna
that's
has
what I'm trying to get at.
input on everything that she needs at this point, and if she doesn't have it, then Tuesday she can tell us, and we can follow up by the end of next week to have everything for Vanessa to start working on the following Monday.
Yeah.
With it.
I've got to double check with the clerk because Monday is a holiday, whether that counts.
Oh.
So what I was going to suggest was we meet Wednesday. What I can do is I can post a meeting for Wednesday and Thursday. And, hopefully in those two sessions, we can get things finished. Hopefully we get it finished on Wednesday, but if we can't, we would have
I think
Thursday.
that's a great idea.
So does that work with everybody? If you can't make it, you can't make it. That's,
Yep.
I can do, personally, I can do Wednesday, but I can't do Thursday. But if we have
okay.
a quorum, go ahead and meet.
Yeah. The other possibility, well, we could also do, Thursday lunch or, or Friday lunch.
Yeah, I have a conflict Wednesday, 6:30 to 8 o'clock in the evening. We could meet earlier, maybe. I don't know.
I know the working,
But you don't need me necessarily at that point.
At this point, we just need a quorum.
yeah, all right. Yeah, I think all right, let's do this. I will post a meeting for Wednesday and Thursday evenings. And, those that can make it, and, hopefully by then we will be pretty well, squared away. I'll actually also post a meeting for Friday at lunch, just so we have it available if we need it.
Fall
We
back.
can always cancel.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to make a suggestion that in addition to posting it, like when you email Melanie and
Yeah,
you copy us all, which is great, but to specifically reach out to Brian and Bob to say, hey, these are the dates that we picked and times that we picked,
Yeah.
just so you know.
Yeah.
Can you get, because if they come back right then and there and say they can't make him, then we don't have a quorum, then we should just, like, I don't want to come meeting date and be surprised. Oh, we don't have enough. Like, let's just make sure we explicitly know whether or not people can make it.
yeah, okay, yep, yeah, well, actually, what I'll send it out to all of you and you can just reply to me. That's not an open meeting law violation. That's, administrative.
Join. Yep.
And then,
So right now for Wednesday night, do we have a quorum? I can go.
I can go.
I can't.
I can Wednesday.
Okay, so we got 3. So as long as Bob or Brian can join, then we're all right.
That's
So, I will send that out ASAP and we can go from there. Okay. Any other did anybody want to talk about the Route 9 Iron City or what the site that
Bartolini owns it.
the Bartolini site? Or should we save that for another day?
Have we talked to Jack?
Nope, not yet. And let's save that for Bob. He's the one that's been pushing that site.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I think that's possible, but again, Black Bartolini controls that site, and
Yeah.
as far as I know, nobody's talked to him about it. But there was always a price that people are willing to sell. So, but I think it's still premature at this point. But it's certainly on the list of possibilities.
actually, what we could do, this is a matter that I think would legitimately be discussed in executive session. And I think before we talk up to a property owner about buying property, I think we ought to have an executive session with the select board.
Yep.
So just so they know, because we're going to want town council involved, and we can meet jointly with the select board in executive session. And
Mhm.
I will talk to Andrew about that.
Can I come back to site for a second? And it tags along with something that Chris was mentioning. I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. So there's a facility here in Southborough that we have. I'm not sure how many of you all know. It's the Wedgwood Wildwood neighborhood
Yes.
across from Finn.
Yep.
So I used to live there, which is why I know about this. But they have their own private wastewater treatment facility, which is pretty cool. But if you look at it, it just goes along what you were saying earlier, Chris. It looks like a house. It looks like a really big house, but it looks like a house. And inside are the giant drums and everything like that. So while I'm not suggesting that we build a house for this thing, there are ways to completely mask and disguise it to make it not even look like what you think it is. And so this is just one example. If you don't know where it is, consider driving by, take a look. It's interesting. So I just wanted to let you all know that if you weren't aware that we have one of these in our own town that serves, I think it's 88 units. So obviously it's much smaller and the leach field's off to the side. So not nearly the scale we're looking for, but just to show you an example.
What's the capacity on that one, Alan? Do you know?
I would have to look
I've
in
seen the
like
list. We have a
yeah.
list of all the plants and that was on there, but I don't remember. That would
Yeah.
be good to, I mean, you actually control odor if you've got it all in a house there, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I literally live across there's a pond there. I lived across from the pond. I never smelled anything. Ever.
It's the same thing with the one up at 600 at Madison Place.
Yeah.
It looks like a house.
Yeah.
It doesn't smell.
Yeah.
And maybe if you open up the door, but
Sure.
the
Yeah.
outside it doesn't.
Right.
You get a discount on the rent if you live in there.
And even the one at St. Mark's that they have
Yeah.
looks like a house.
Looks like the
doesn't
barn,
smell.
right?
Yeah.
St. Mark's, I feel like.
Yeah.
I haven't been to that plant in a number of years, but yeah, I've been there a number of times over the years.
Okay. Good. We have Brian back. Hey, Brian, a quick question for you. We talked about meetings next week to be on a timeline to get the application in by June 4th, and it was suggested Wednesday night at 6:30, Thursday night at 6:30, and Friday at noon to post meetings just in case. Particularly Wednesday, we're one short of a quorum. Can you do Wednesday night at 6:30?
I can't make it for 6:30. But I've got a fighting chance to be there for 7 if it's Wednesday.
I could do 7:30 Wednesday, frankly.
Let's do 7:30.
Okay.
There's nothing sacred about 6:30.
That gets Brian there for pretty sure at 7:30, right, Brian?
Correct.
Okay.
And
Correct.
it's a stretch for
All
me, but I think I could do 7:30. Okay.
And then what about Thursdays if we had to? I can do Thursday.
Thursday I could do as well.
Okay. Thursday at 6:30,
Yes.
I
Good.
can do that too.
and then I'm gonna post one for Friday at noon just in case, but I am greatly hopeful that we will not need it.
Be done by then. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I
well-
have already spoken to Vanessa about getting on her calendar to get this information into the IGX system, because she also is the person who's doing it for other grants that are being submitted. So
Good.
that-
Right. But I thought we were going to request access for Anna from Vanessa. That way we don't have to bottleneck through
that
Vanessa.
was not my action item, but I did.
No, I'm not saying it was. I thought
But
that's what we
I
talked.
did, and somebody with higher powers, if that's what you want, somebody with higher powers than myself, needs to do that, because Vanessa specifically said that Mark and Kathy want one person accessing.
Okay.
the system, which makes sense to me.
Okay.
As long as we can get it done. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's why I want to get on her calendar. I said, put us on for June 2nd as your first customer. Only because of knowing problems that have
Mhm.
cropped up in the past.
Yeah. Anna, have you guys had trouble getting the IGX to work near the deadline time?
I personally haven't submitted any grants. It's always been the town.
Okay,
But they, in the past, haven't had any issues.
okay.
I know
If
from
you've never done it,
experience.
we don't
they've
need to
had-
make you the guinea pig for us. So we'll do it through Vanessa.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, excellent work.
Anything
Uh,
else?
Anything else? I have posted a meeting if anybody if we have a quorum before the Conservation Commission, but don't feel bad if you don't show up because that'll make one less set of minutes we have to write.
Yeah, I've got a conflict for tonight, so if anybody else is going to be there, the quorum's going to be there. They're going to have to take notes.
Well, we need 4 to have a quorum,
Yeah.
so,
And
Okay.
it's probably better just to have one person there as well, so
yeah.
we can disavow knowledge of anything that Al promised at the meeting.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right, you mean the ponies that I'm gonna give people? All right.
Exactly.
Then let's, then if there's no further business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Okay,
Second.
okay, we gotta do a roll call vote because so let's see, Alan,
Aye.
Claire,
I.
Brian,
Aye.
Sam,
Aye.
and Al is aye. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks,
Folks,
Hello.
thank you,
Yeah, thank
Anna.
you.
Well done.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
All right,
All right.
see you.
Excellent.